Hello, everybody. It's Wendy Reinhardt Capsack, President and CEO of PBH, coming to you live from a basement today. Thanks so much for joining our March Health and Wellness webinar. It's also National Nutrition Month, and we also celebrated registered dietitians and dietetic technicians registered earlier this month as well. So welcome everyone to a very important webinar around the state of the plate. This research, it's really revealing, and I think it gives us a lot to consider as health and wellness professionals when it comes to increasing or positively impacting fruit and vegetable consumption. All right, let's go ahead and jump on in. I'm gonna be playing lots of hats today. I look really good in that picture, maybe. Back when we met in person. I'm gonna be both your speaker and your moderator today, and I'm gonna be on screen. So bear with me. If I look down for a minute, it's because I'm looking at all your fabulous questions coming in. I'm gonna give you a little information about PBH. I'm also going to tell you a little bit more about all the great deliverables that you can receive as relates to this webinar. And then we're going to launch into the actual content. So most of you are familiar with PBH. The Produce for Better Health Foundation, it's a 501c3 nonprofit. We're the only national organization that's 100% every single day dedicated to helping people live happier, healthier lives because they are not just eating, but also enjoying more fruits and vegetables in all their forms, fresh, frozen, canned, dried, and 100% juice each and every day. And I think when it comes to a webinar like this one, it's really important that I recognize all of you as partners because all of us are in this together. When it comes to fruit and vegetable consumption, we're super passionate about it. But I think what you're going to see with what we're presenting today is there's a need to elevate new fruit and vegetable consumption behaviors, maybe as a national priority. And we can accelerate growth in consumption. And what we're doing is serving the public good and making the world a better place. So you are a very valued partner to PBH in this mission and our purpose. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't share with you about the award-winning Have a Plant movement. And this movement, I was so proud of our team and all of you for joining into the movement. This was launched in 2019 in April. And so we're almost having our 2-year anniversary. And we are just thrilled with the results that we've shared and just the number of people reached now with this award-winning movement. And so really Have a Plant is less about a prescriptive way of talking about fruit and vegetable consumption, but more about the fruit and vegetable enjoyment and eating experience and the enjoyment that can come along with that. So listen, we are so grateful for you as partners, and I hope you feel that we're an asset to you, bringing you great information like what we're going to share today. And we're thrilled that so many consumers, influencers, professionals in the millions are now part of this movement. What you may not be as aware of is a movement that we have that's very much in what we would call the professional or thought leadership space. And that's our Lead the Change movement. So if the Have a Plant movement is really this consumer facing call to action, the Lead the Change movement is really for professionals. And what we're really talking about is a multi-sector consumption initiative. And so there's an opportunity to unite the fruit and vegetable industry along with all of you, really the food system thought leaders of today, to close the consumption gap and develop innovative behavior-based solutions to help people enjoy fruit and vegetables for happier, healthier lives. And so this would be consistent, for example, with other major bodies like, for example, the dietary guidelines that are calling for, let's say, systematic change when it comes to improving, let's say, healthful dietary patterns, of which most of them include, if not all of them, a great emphasis on fruits and vegetables. And so this is a pretty bold statement given all the unrest and challenges in our world today. But we said this prior to the pandemic. It became maybe more relevant to us within the pandemic, is that we have a fruit and vegetable consumption crisis. Now, that's not something we're talking to consumers about. We want to keep it happy and positive. but it is affecting our culture, our society, and our economy. And we're seeing whether it be a lack of access or a lack of maybe actionability within, let's say, where people might be able to access or consume fruits and vegetables, is that the results I'm going to share with you today indicate that we may not be making much headway. And so we really believe that it's time for a new era of what we're calling conscious consumption, and that we must come together, coalesce around fruit and vegetable consumption in a way like we haven't before, and act with one purpose, one voice, and one call to action. Now, this is a three-part initiative, and it includes the research you're going to hear today, the results of the PBH State of the Plate research. This research was launched about actually 1 month ago today, and now I'm going to be sharing more insights with you, and would love your ideas on how to continue to improve upon our approach at PBH on consumption. Really, the one purpose we feel comes from this research, which is we really do need to elevate new fruit and vegetable consumption behaviors if we want to make a change. And so the coalescing around consumption is really, we're looking to pull together a consumption coalition. And this will be very important because PBH alone can't affect consumption by itself. It's all of us, it's all of you. And that's why we talked about your very much valued partnership in this mission and purpose. And then we're very hopeful to come together with folks on what we might call maybe even the first ever National Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Summit, where out of that, we get to talk about great innovation, best practices. There's some amazing programs out there that are really making a difference in people's lives every day, particularly in the area of access. We want to showcase that. And then we want to determine for various sectors, what should the national action plan be on fruits and vegetables? It's a big idea. It's bigger than PBH, and certainly it includes everyone on the call today, as well as maybe even others that are a part of your world. And so we'd love your feedback on this big idea. I would be remiss if I didn't, and also just in the interest of disclosure, to let you know who is supporting this from particularly the fruit and vegetable industry and other really important partners. And so I've listed here these individuals, and these people have also funded the research essentially that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And so I think, this is really important to recognize these industry, change agents or agents of change. A lot of folks talk about consumption, but these folks have leaned in and really supported this really important initiative, and doing so really have supported all of us in trying to improve the lives of Americans by eating more fruits and vegetables and experiencing that. All right, so that's a little bit more about PBH, maybe even more than you knew before, because we haven't really talked about this professional multi-sector consumption initiative, Lead the Change, with all of you until now. And so this research really is quite connected to that. And so I wanted to share more about that big idea with you. In terms of housekeeping, so this particular webinar, as our every other PBH health and wellness webinar, has been approved for 1 hour of continuing professional education credits through the Commission on Dietetic Registration. Now, great, you're going to get free continuing education. You're also going to be able to experience this live. And so I want you to take a step back. I want you to relax. I want you to take this information in. And I also want you to ask questions or provide feedback as it's coming to you. And you can use the Q&A function, that's part of a Zoom. You can see it usually on the top of your screen. So use the Q&A portion. Now, in addition to experiencing the webinar, you're also going to receive a link to the certificate, the recording, and a PDF of the presentation. So I do want you to know that that will be made available to you. And usually we try to get it within the same week of the webinar. All right. So be on the lookout for that email, that follow-up email from us with this information. All right. So let's dig into the State of the Plate, America's Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Trends 2020. Now, I used some pretty strong words before around a consumption crisis. And there's no doubt that this 2020 in particular illuminated multiple crises in our country and our nation. And so I am going to focus on this one. And I'm going to talk just right now. What you see on the screen is not PBH research, which we're going to dig into in a moment, but really research from other sources. And so you've heard this one, certainly from CDC, is that 9 in 10 Americans do not eat enough fruits and vegetables. And this is really volume information. And then with the most recent dietary guidelines for Americans, we see that the amount of fruits and vegetables consumed over the course of, let's say, the last decade or more, it has not changed significantly. The last decade or more, all of the media, all of the, amazing cooking shows, all of the focus on plant forward cuisine, all of our efforts, really, we haven't seen a significant increase. Now, most of you on the phone know really what the actual recommendations are. But this is where we see, gosh, the average adult consumes maybe a cup of fruit a day, a little bit more of vegetables a day, but this is nowhere meeting certainly the guidelines. And so this just gives you some additional data here from those other sources that are connected, for example, with major of our federal health agencies that indicate, you know what? Consumption has not changed. And for many of us, we would say, and certainly at PBH, it's the single most important thing to add to your diet for both health as well as your happiness. And so there's something to consider here, and what this lack of change in consumption, what it might really be meaning for our culture, our society, and our economy. So we wanted to capture what was really happening with fruit and vegetable consumption trends. And so what's great about the government data that we shared is it's volume data. So it's really giving a sense of like how much. I mentioned earlier that we're interested in elevating fruit and vegetable consumption behaviors. And we want all of us talk about long lasting behavior change. And so when we look at habits and behavior change habits, we are also very interested in volume, but not just that, we're also interested in frequency, because frequency would be perhaps indicative of habits. And so that's really what this research is sharing with us. And a lot of that, the data I'm going to share with you today is really around frequency. And so if we can wrap our head around that. So PBH commissions the NPD Group. They're really well known, super fabulous in terms of their data analytic abilities. And we asked them to complete this research for us. And they utilize their National Eating Trends database. And so this provides us a complete view of consumption habits by capturing the following things: what, when, where, a little bit on the why, and how all foods and beverages in all situations would be consumed. And so the situations being in the home and also outside of the home. And this in-depth analysis is conducted for PBH every 5 years. Actually, the first iteration of this was published. It was the 2005 State of the Plate report. And so it was a thrill to be able to, for the first time myself, to be involved in this process as the leader of PBH. Now, there's some more details here around the actual design, and happy to answer any questions related to that. But the biggest thing I want to note for you is what you're going to see is pre-pandemic data. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, Wendy, why are we just went through this whole crazy year? Well, I'm going to provide some color commentary there, and certainly you'll have some too, maybe in the Q&A around, like, well, gosh, is that applicable today? Or based on what we're seeing today in the context of the currently still existing pandemic, is how would these insights really apply? And so that's what we're doing at PBH. So you're going to have, like I said, good ideas as well. Right around this time, actually last year, remember I showed you, a group of people that were really interested in understanding these trends, and we had to make a decision. Do we forego this research, or do we actually, it would be really important, given that we do this every 5 years, to truly capture a moment in time, the moment in time before what we knew would be a very disruptive change. So think about where you were last year, essentially a year into the pandemic. Go back to the very beginning. There was an inkling, maybe, travel would change. Maybe it would last 3 months. Gosh, it looks like we're at a shutdown. Maybe that'll last a week. it's been a pretty big disruptor. And with disruption comes maybe a change in long-term habits, also maybe some return to old ones. So there was very important still to capture this moment in time so we could look at those trends all the way back from 2005. And then we are planning more behavioral research this year in such a way that, actually being a Monday morning quarterback a year out, there's actually some value in that. Looking at this data, looking at our experience over the last year, and then moving into another research project later in the year that builds on all of that knowledge. So keep your questions coming. I'm certainly happy to answer any methodology questions, but also your ideas, your insights, given what we've recently, been living in for the last year. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide overall fruit and vegetable consumption trends, and then I'm going to provide some specific pieces related to fruit, some specific pieces related to vegetables and juice. And then I'll just touch on some stuff related to all forms and some what we like to call produce pairings. I will tell you that the full complement of this research, we're just going to scratch the surface today. And so even if we don't get to all of your questions, know that that's helping us even go back through this data and maybe find out where there are some even deeper insights. And so certainly, our work with NPD will continue on as we really continue to look through the data analytics. Okay. So we're going to scratch the surface today. There's probably several hundred, I know there is several hundreds a slide's worth of information. We're going to do about 30 today, but the big stuff that then will get the conversation and your juices, your ideas flowing. All right. So here's the good news. Fruits and vegetables continue to be among the top foods and beverages consumed. Yay, we've made the top 10. All right, so let's look at what's in this top 10. And this is in-home, okay? So coffee, yep, number one. You see, when we look back at 2009, gosh, some other types of beverages were right up there with coffee. You see kind of these, staple foods, for example, sandwiches or cereal, bread in there. You also see fruit, and you see fruit juice, and you see traditional vegetables, for example. Now let's fast forward a decade. And now what you're going to see is fruit and vegetables are still in the mix. They have lost a little bit of share potentially for vegetables in the percent of in-home occasions, meaning how often they consume them. But you see one group that we were looking at previously in particular, it falls off this top 10 list, and that's juice. And so a couple other interesting, facts here is cereal has declined. And I thought this was interesting, and it too doesn't make it on the top 10 list anymore. What was really interesting to us is we wanted to know, not just what people are eating in terms of which fruits and vegetables, how are they eating, with what are they eating them? And cereal, both hot and cold, is the top fruit pairing that we see. And it's not in all occasions, but if that's declining, then maybe there's some missed opportunity fruit consumption occasions that are also declining. And so we could do that for a number of foods. So I think for PBH, we're interested in, yes, what's happening in fruits and vegetables, but also what's also happening within the context, let's say, of the plate as it relates to fruits and vegetables. And are there other trends that are also increasing or decreasing for which we might think about from a communications perspective, how to help consumers eat more fruits and vegetables? All right, so here's the big one. So what you see here is juices separated out. It's in the red. You see vegetables are in the green, and then you see fruit is in the purple. And what we see here is that frequency of fruit intake has slightly increased since the early on, but we do see a decline in vegetables. And so what you see on the right is just the difference between the last time we did the research in 2015, that last State of the Plate report, and then you see since the very beginning of when we started doing this type of research, what is the decline there? And so there's this slow erosion that we're seeing between 2015, let's say, and 2020. Remember, this is just capturing like what people eat. I don't get to affect this with like what questions I ask. This is like straight up like what people are eating and the frequency with which they're eating it. You see that we see a bigger, gap when we look at for the first time we've done this in 2004. So that's where we see nearly a 10% decrease in overall consumption. And that's where we see a marked difference between juice and vegetables declining. But we also see, remember, we're talking about that uptick in fruit. So I want to also just, while we're looking at this, talk about the measurement here, which is annual eatings per capita. So that means annual eatings per like individual. And so let's just talk about from a consumption numbers perspective. We know consumption is already not that great, right? So 1 in 10 are actually, meeting recommendation. That means 9 in 10 are not. So then we look and we say, okay, well, look, there's like this slow erosion potentially happening. And what does that really yield? So a near 10% decline is there are 66 less eatings per capita, 66 less occasions for which consumers are eating fruits and vegetables. Okay. So if there's 52 weeks in a year, that means consumption numbers are already bad. And now we're losing one a week at least. And so that might not seem like a big deal, but when we look at frequency as a proxy for habit forming, I think that's where we might want to take a look at this further. So we always want to understand, yes, what are the numbers? What's the relevance of that? But when you're dealing with numbers that are already pretty darn low, we can't afford any more decreases. And so I think that's why this research is very interesting, but also makes us at PBH certainly self-reflect and figure out, gosh, we need to make some shifts in our approach. Okay, so let's dig now a little bit deeper, and we'll go through these slides at a little bit quicker clip. While fruits are somewhat balanced in their consumption among meal and snack occasions. So remember that this is us saying, okay, gosh, look at this fruits bar right here. Gosh, okay, snack, pretty good. Sometimes for dinner, okay, lunch and breakfast, fairly equitable to some degree, is that we see that vegetables and juice are kind of different. So most vegetables being consumed at dinner are part of that dinner meal. And then we see for juice, for example, it's more of a breakfast item. Okay, it's not necessarily like a dinner item per se. All right, I think one of the things that's super fascinating for me here is to actually look at the next slide, which is, okay, well, within each one of those snack and or meal occasions, how is it being consumed a little bit? Where is the position, if you will, within the context of the meal or on the plate? So again, fruits look a little bit more versatile in terms of disposition, and vegetables are often more eaten as a side. And we have since the 80s, I'm a child of the 80s, really we've seen a decline in the side dish occasion. So as I like to say, it's like this slow erosion. It was like the vegetables were on the side, now they're like slowly falling off the plate. And so we can't afford that. But one of the things from a messaging perspective, and also tying it to some other behavioral research that we've discussed before, is looking at this appetizer position. And so very little percent of eatings are focused on the appetizer occasion. And so we know from other research that when, for example, children are served fruits and or vegetables in advance of the meal, they actually end up consuming more. And so this fruits and veggies first idea is something that is certainly noted in, let's say, the food and nutrition literature, also the behavioral literature. And now we're seeing that there could be an excellent opportunity for more fruits and vegetables to be eaten first in the context of the appetizer position. Fruits and vegetables are consumed, I mentioned, at, a lot of like you think about one pot meals, one bowl meals, sheet pan meals, that type of idea. And really what we see here, you see there's three opportunities for fruits and vegetables and also juice. a dish itself, meaning it's by itself, it's added to something, or it's an ingredient within. And so, based on the NPD net methodology, is these questions are asked. It's not just like, okay, what did you eat? How much did you eat? If it was eaten by itself, did you eat it by itself, or did you add it, or is it an ingredient within that particular occasion? And so we see that really people are thinking about fruits and vegetables mostly in the context of like the thing itself. And what's interesting to me about that, and we'll talk about that uptick in fruit, for example, is fruit is seen as a little bit easier. We've seen this in other research as well. You know, we might talk about them as fruits and vegetables, but people really see them differently. They're consumed differently. Their view, the experience can be very different. And I think there's probably an opportunity, given that most people see them as, you know, just apples or just broccoli, meaning a dish itself or by itself, is that there's a lot of opportunity from a flavor perspective and enjoyment perspective to look at how to pair them with each other and with other foods too. And so I think there's a lot more plays for us to make in the addition and ingredient category. All right. The majority of fruits and vegetables are consumed in home. And vegetables, this again, pre pandemic, had the largest share in the away from home consumption. All right. So, what does this mean? Well, in home and carried means we likely purchased that in a retail setting. And even if we carried it and took it somewhere, it was sourced from our home, meaning we probably purchased it through a retail establishment. The vegetables is an interesting one because pre-pandemic, we saw an uptick of vegetables being offered, and they weren't all French fries per se, in this away from home consumption occasion. And what concerns me about this is that for many, there is there's less food maybe being consumed at within the context of away from home or food service. And I think there's an excellent opportunity here. I mean, if it wasn't for food service, I do not believe that kale or Brussels sprouts would have made a comeback. And that's because we're enamored, and we may even take a chance in a food service situation to try something new. And oh, by the way, it's been prepared in an amazing way that tastes great. It's a positive flavor experience, and I want to repeat that experience either in my home or the next time I come. And so I feel like maybe we've missed that. Another example would be salad bars. You know, a lunch occasion for children as well as maybe you know, adults. And so we may be losing, for example, share there for vegetables, given that opportunity, that occasion that went poof overnight. And so I think this is something to really look at. Given we see such a decline in vegetable consumption, yet this food service, this flavor moment, this easy made it easy for me because you did it for me. We saw a bright spot here. All right. So now that was kind of just general overall. Now let's hit a little bit deeper on fruit, vegetables, juice, and then we'll zoom out again and talk about all forms. All right. So I said, hey, fruit was a bright spot. So in-home fruit we've seen some increases. I'll take it because I said we couldn't even stand a slight decrease in anything given where consumption numbers were given that government data. So yay, we got a little bit of an uptick. What does that look like? Well, total eatings, 5 more. Great. Most of that came from the in-home occasion. And now let's talk about the relevance of that. I'm going to take it. I said I would, and I'll stand by that. It means 5 more per year. Okay. So gosh, let's lean into that one because people are doing it. Let's lean into it and see where all the opportunities are to increase those eatings of fruit. Now, how are they eating this? Okay. So we see this coming from snacks and side dishes, not a part of main dish, not a part of fruit. And I will tell you, if you dig into previous reports, particularly what you might consider now the silent generation, they were eating fruit as a dessert. And in our last report, we really saw a decline in that. It stayed relatively flat this go round, but I think gosh, can we bring back fruit as a dessert? Think about how to position that as as a way to satisfy a sweet craving. Now, younger children, all right, are some of the heaviest consumers of fruit, okay? Yet their consumption has declined. All right. And so this is looking at age group right now. You see our young, and what concerns me about this is our youngest children in particular, they are declining in their fruit consumption. And yeah, we're seeing this at least once a month, and maybe a little bit, certainly less for kind of that early school age kid. But this is concerning because we can't stand to lose anything. So I am concerned, particularly for those young children. You see an uptick here as we go into middle school and kids having a little bit more control now going into high school and also in our college and university segment. And fruit tastes good when it's good, it's good. And I think fruit also too, we've seen from other research, is perceived to be much more associated with positive emotional experience. So perhaps something like that is taking hold. It's a little bit easier to take grab and go as well. And so we see that uptick, remember, in those snack occasions. Now, what actual fruits are kind of in our top 10 list? And so this is a pretty data heavy slide here, but bananas, berries, apples, citrus, we see nuts in the mix, grapes, melons, applesauce, fruit salad, peaches, pineapple, pears, cherries are on the side over here. And again, what does this mean? Well, this means generally, not quite, people are having a banana a little less than a week. Okay. So gosh, how I talk to people all the time. Some people are actually taking their banana with their coffee in the morning. Remember, coffee had that number one spot there in that top 10 list early on in all foods and beverages. How do we get some habits like that where it's not a once a week, it might be an everyday kind of thing? So there's some opportunities here. Certainly berries have seen some increases, and we'll go through that a little bit more. Now, yeah, what we've seen, some growth, right? The growth is coming from, bananas, grapes, blueberries, oranges, and that includes mandarins as well, and strawberries. So what do I take away from this? Bananas, super easy to grab and go. Grapes, I just got to kind of rinse those suckers and then they're ready to go. They taste good. They're refreshing. Berries, there's been a lot of great promotion around the benefits of berries for lots of different conditions, for which people might want to increase. They're also beautiful and they're delicious. And then oranges, those easy peel mandarins could be contributing to this category lift here. Now, again, this was pre-pandemic. So raisins, we saw they were declining, yet during the pandemic, they were shelf stable. There was an uptick there. Also, people were baking a little bit too. And some people, this is a whole nother debate I have around, do you put raisins in your baked goods or not? I'm for it. Not everyone is. So think about that. This mixed fruit, now let's look at this: peaches, cantaloupe, pineapple, apples, we're staying stable. But we see some of these groups where there is maybe a knife involved. There is, there's also maybe, it's not fresh cut, so I got to do it. I've got to do it. It might be those peaches in the summer. They're delicious. Oh my gosh, they're a little messy, but there's the pit there. So there's something around ease and convenience that maybe could be contributing a little to this decline. Now let's put that in perspective. This is maybe a decline of less than one time per year. But again, some of these for which are seasonal, we want to make sure that we see those lifts, particularly in those seasonal times. All right, now we do have this kind of data. NPD, through their national eating trends, was able to capture this only for when fruit and vegetables are eaten as is, meaning by themselves. And so melons are eaten in the greatest quantity. Why do you think that is? I'm sure some of you are putting that into the Q&A right now. So melons, when you slice open that melon, you've got to you got to commit to that, and you got to slice it up. And so maybe you're thinking, oh, it's here. Maybe if you're like me, you're probably taking a slice too, just to kind of try it, while you're slicing that delicious melon open. And so, we're seeing a big uptick there. It's in front of us. Once it's cut, it's on. I'm probably going to eat a little bit more of it. So these others you see, it's a little bit more what we might expect for, let's say, a serving of fruit. All right, so that was just scratching the surface. We're gonna, given our time, head on over to vegetables. And this is where it's like, oh man. So while away from home, remember pre-pandemic consumption was up, it wasn't necessarily enough to compensate for the decrease in in-home consumption. So we saw a total decline, okay, at least once a month. We weren't doing that hot, remember from that government data before. And so we saw a total decline, and then we saw that in home really suffer, and then we saw that away from home, we saw that uptick. Okay. So, there's some interesting things here and some concerns, particularly given that away from home essentially has evaporated for some of maybe people's favorite opportunities like salad bars or even some other types of restaurants. Food service is still moving though too. Vegetables are being concerned both less as a main dish and a side dish. And so I mentioned that, in the 80s, there was always like on the side. And now, even with kind of that main dish, think about like, again, those one sheet meals, the one pot meals, we're still not seeing vegetables as a part of those either. And so I think, gosh, what can we do with that? Here. Now, remember, they weren't being consumed as an appetizer either. And charcuterie boards are all boards overall. The snack meal trend, that could be a really good thing to look out for as we consider how to increase vegetables. The majority of in-home vegetable decline is being driven at the dinner occasion, and also the side dish. So it's this dinner occasion that's dropped. We see a slight decrease in lunch too, and then within each of those, if you will, we see that decline, particularly at the dinner time, that decline in the side dish. And so even in the context of public health and helping people make half their plate fruits and vegetables, and thinking about it, very literally kind of the way the plate looks, if you will, that side dish, we're losing it. And so we need to bring it back on a little more color to keep that plate super positive and plant forward. All right, so who is declining? So this is where we see some of the biggest declines in almost all the age groups. And really one thing I want to point out here is I want you to look at these red arrows. So we see the youngest children, 1 to 3, 4 to 8, 9 to 13. Okay, so like through that middle school period, then we see an uptick. I get to pick. I'm in high school, and that college and university segment has been doing an amazing job servicing that age group. And then we see 31 and onward, and then 71. These are the people that we can always depend on for fruit and vegetable consumption. I'll tell you that. What's concerning to me is the connection potentially between the red arrows of the youngest Americans and those that are in a position to be parents, particularly in the 31 to 50-year age group. And if I break this down even by generations, we see particularly that the younger Gen Zs, along with those millennials who are in the position to be parents of most likely young children right now, they're not consuming fruits and vegetables, and their kids aren't either. And so we all want what's best for our children. And I think there's an opportunity to continue to empower parents with some of those early child feeding practices, and also the patience and the perseverance required to create veggie lovers. And so a lot of the behavioral literature, for example, shows that even repetition is so very important. Exposure is important, repetition is important. And repetition doesn't mean like I love it in the end. It means it also could mean I tolerate this. And that's in that behavioral literature. It's that perseverance and recognizing that the tolerance might be good enough. And but we hope, of course, that we can elicit and enjoyment over time, and certainly cultivate a craving along the way. So that's one thing I think that's particularly interesting. And then I just want to give a shout out to the silent generation. They are still over so very many years holding it together when it comes to these consumption numbers. And even if the boomer era, those folks are declining, we see they have the largest decline actually. Um, we're seeing though that still that 71 plus, they're dependable, and they also probably have other skills around cooking, etc., that maybe we've lost with some of our younger cohorts. All right, so which kinds of vegetables are the most popular? So we see the salad, straight up, a little more than once a week, hanging it. That's good. We see French fries in that second spot. And if we look now at the onions, tomatoes, and maybe even a little bit of that lettuce category, what are we talking about there? Well, even the dietary guidelines recognize that burgers and sandwiches were one of the most prominent ways that people were eating their vegetables. And this research is kind of connected to that as well. Then we see some of the ones that the carrots, the green beans, corn, peppers, broccoli, and we see other forms, whether they be mashed potatoes or baked potatoes. And then we see some of the others, like a celery, for example, that could also be a straight up snack, or certainly a ingredient as well. So this is that top 10 popularity contest. We see that there are some that are on the decline. So you can see the uptick there. I just called it into, avocados. These are ubiquitous, probably since the last time we did this research in 2015. They are also a part of pop culture, and we've seen an increase of one annual eating occasion. So that there's an investment there, right? We see an uptick too in the salsa category, the pasta sauce category. So from an all forms perspective, certainly an easy opportunity here. And then we see some of these declines: onions, tomatoes, lettuce. We see the carrots to the green salads. So where's this coming from? I mentioned that the sandwich, the burger opportunity. Now let's talk about this within the context of the pandemic. Are you adding a slice? Maybe people are, but if I'm going to slice a tomato for my sandwich that I'm making now at home, and onions and lettuce, that's work for people. And so maybe we would see an even further decline. We're also, remember, seeing a decline of the side dish, and the side salad is not necessarily a part of everyone's plates these days. And so that green salad, those carrots, we could be losing a little ground with the side salad. So these are some new opportunities to make sandwiches, burgers, etc., interesting and flavorful, and have some additional texture there. And the side salad is something that, I don't know, maybe it could make a comeback. So when consumed as is, salads are gonna be the one that's got the greatest quantity, and then you see from there where the rest of them fall. All right, so now let's think about where are these vegetables consumed. And you're gonna see something, for example, on the headline of this slide: light vegetable eaters. Okay, so one thing that we did that was super interesting this time, that wasn't done in previous research, is because of our interest in habits, we were really interested in, like, okay, so who's killing it out there? Who's crushing fruit and vegetable consumption? Who is that 1 in 10 that's actually meeting the recommendations? And those are the people that really are eating fruits and vegetables at every single meal and snack occasion, and they think about fruits and veggies first. And so we wanted to look at those people based on frequency, and we wanted to look at medium eaters based on frequency and light eaters. I will tell you, if you remember nothing from this webinar today, here's the deal: most Americans are light fruit and veggie consumers. They are eating vegetables once a day, and fruit even less. So that's where we're at, okay, from a frequency perspective. So we did that. We looked at that type of data overlay for a lot of this. And so you're going to get an inkling of that here, for example. So more than 2/3 of vegetables are consumed like across levels. So are particularly when we get to the in-home occasion, sourced at retail, eaten in the home. Now, when we overlaid that light, medium, heavy, or high frequency vegetable consumer, it was our lightest eaters that were more dependent on consuming them away from home. And so if, like we talked about before, if some of those opportunities to consume have evaporated, our lightest consumers now are like extra light when it comes to vegetable consumption potentially. So more to unpack there for sure. I'm going to go through juice consumption. I'm going to go through that fairly quickly, and then I'm going to finish out with all forms. I see I've been very focused on presenting the data. I see that there's a number of questions in the Q&A, so I'll get to as many of those as I possibly can. So juice. Away from home juice consumption is up a little bit. And so there were some maybe grab and go opportunities for juice, but it's not enough to compensate for the decline in in-home consumption. And it's also not enough. Remember those total consumption numbers. It's that uptick in away from home, or certainly the decline that we see. It's not really being made up. And like all of a sudden now we're meeting our fruit recommendation because we stopped maybe or decreased our juice consumption. So what we see is an overall decline in juice consumption. That's probably not surprising. We see the decline in frequency among all age groups, including our youngest children. And, maybe not a surprise. We've seen certainly the American Academy of Pediatrics, along with the American Dental Association, for example, provide juice guidelines. They may or may not have said to stop drinking juice entirely, but it appears that maybe the pendulum has swung all the way in the other direction. And certainly the dietary guidelines do recognize 100% fruit juice as well as 100% vegetable juice as an opportunity. And so, I think because overall consumption has declined, some of it's coming from this. I think we should think about this for a minute and really find the ways in which juice can be enjoyed within the context of guidelines. Just to give you a sense of like which are the more popular juices, and so this is probably not a surprise, but orange juice, okay, overall consumed less than essentially once a week. Maybe half of the year or so. Apple juice is being consumed. And then we see much lower annual eatings per capita for other juices like cranberry juice. Lemon juice actually made its way up, mostly like, as an ingredient or added to something. And then we see grape juice and then some of the blends going down the list there. We see an increase. I mentioned that lemon juice category, the fruit smoothie category, a little uptick there. And again, that lime juice. So people are figuring out how to add this lemon and lime juice. I think it's interesting. Remember back to okay, well, what are people doing and what are they doing it with? And so I don't know, is this about beverages, or is it about using these in the context of actual food preparation? All right, only 2 slides here on one slide on all forms. There's a lot more I could unpack here, and then one on pairings. So fresh accounts for more than 1/2 of vegetables consumed and more than 2/3 of fruit consumed. And so what we see here is that fresh continues to gain share. Some of the other forms decrease or stay flat. And so again, it's not like fresh is a replacement oftentimes, or we're not like holding our own for some of the other forms and then adding to. So this is another one I think for us on messaging, given what the dietary guidelines are saying and other research that, and also we saw in the pandemic, some people were kind of thinking, okay, I have my fresh stuff, but then I need to make sure that I have stuff because I'm not shopping as often, for example, is that there's a place for these other forms, absolutely. And there's experience that's associated with all of them. And there's also time that's associated with part of that experience, along with flavor, texture, etc. So, previous research from PBH does show when all forms are in the home, people actually do prepare more and consume more. And so I think that's just about choices and options, and making sure that it's there, and we know what to do with it. And so I think there's something to be talked about more and unpacked more with this one in particular. And then this goes to those pairings. And so I mentioned this early on. Again, this is what people eat today and or pre-pandemic, is that hot and cold cereal. Those show up as being a top pairing for fruit, as does yogurt. Iced tea, oh, maybe that's where that lemon juice was going. Then we were followed by smoothies and or fruit added to salad. Now, again, this is 3% of the time. What about 100% of the time salads are eaten? We get to put fruit on there, or at least 50%. Some of those other favorite breakfast options like pancakes, etc. So this is an opportunity, everybody. And this is how people eat, right? Most people are eating fruits and vegetables in isolation potentially, but they're missing the full complement of how to add fruits and vegetables through the full day and in all the ways that those high frequency consumers are actually crushing it. When it comes to vegetables, we see salad. So we would expect that, but then we see that lunch meat, that burger come back along with other ethnic mixed dishes. This is typically pastas and tacos and stuff like that. And then we see some of our, uh, um, other protein sources making their way onto the plate as well. So, opportunities here to really help people think about where to add these fruits and vegetables to the foods, the meal experiences that they have all the time. All right. So, what's our opportunity, everybody? Well, here's the deal. And we've heard this. If you look at this, look at that blue bar. These are people that say, I am straight up following these guidelines. And these are the people, this is that 1 in 10. They know they're going for it and they're eating fruits and vegetables at every single meal or snack occasion. There's another third of people that aren't really focused on this, and that makes sense. And then there's another group that say they're trying to get more. Most people are not trying to get less, so that's good. But it's really most of the, I said most Americans are light fruit and veggie consumers. That's this pink and purple bar. So about 50% of those folks are interested. They're trying. And so what can we do about that? Well, what you see here is that when people are eating fruit or vegetables, and again, they're not saying this 100% of the time. Like, even if something ranks high, it's like, well, how high? Is at 34% of the eating occasions for fruit, it was healthy, nutritious, it was somewhat easy. It's a favorite. I have it and I made it with something I had. These numbers still aren't that very high. Okay. This isn't like, oh yeah, we're crushing it in terms of easy, or we're crushing it in terms of like these people fruit's a favorite. We see those numbers or those percentages decline even further with vegetables. And then lastly, relative to other foods. So relative to coffee, relative to chocolate, relative is that fruit, it indexed a little bit higher when we get to it was healthy and nutritious. That makes sense. It's the same for vegetables, even less so though. I regularly have it. Good. There was some household penetration there, and I had it around. Okay. Well, I think what's important sometimes is to say, well, what isn't indexing higher? What are fruit and vegetables not associated with? And is that something that we're missing? And so that's where you see it was easy, not scoring or indexing high on that. And also it was a favorite, or it was satisfying a craving or a taste, or was a favorite. And so I think it's important, like we said, it's not just all about like, how are we doing here? What's the positive? It's also like, what's the opportunity? And certainly habits and positive experience, positive flavor experience that I want to repeat, there's something there. And so this is where you really see us looking at this no, feel, do behavioral framework and really shifting. 5 a day is always going to be important. It's straight up what the recommendations generally are. So that's a fact and a figure. And most people know generally that they should be eating more. What I think as health professionals, we often skip this middle one around desire and emotion and craving. And we go straight to like, and here's what you do. You need it, here's what you do. And so, in recognizing that there's been more of a chronic lack of consumption increasing, in fact, it's remained flat, or the habits are further eroding from a frequency point of view, is what do we do different? And so, how do we tap into the feelings, the emotions, the cravings, and really get people to fall in love with fruits and vegetables and want to make them now a part of their routine, their plan, their conversations, and get them to try it? Well, a famous behavioral scientist and Nobel Prize winner says we need to make it easy. And so this is where, we're really continuing to delve into this research. And just a case in point, on that high, medium, low frequency consumer, most Americans are low frequency, is those people seem to be less interested in recipes. It's the high frequency consumers, the ones that are eating it every day at every meal and snack occasion. They are super interested because they need to keep it fresh and exciting. In fact, they want to experiment more than most. It's the light consumer that maybe we're not talking to at all with all of our great ideas. The idea that assembly could be easy, the addition, the fruits and veggies first and the addition. And do we want to start there? And we need to maybe consider how we might shift and change, yes, based on demographics and things like that, but also in the context of frequency. How do we pull someone or elevate someone from a light frequency consumer, which is most Americans, to someone who's consuming on a much more regular basis? So I'm going to hit up the Q&A here, and there's a couple questions here that are coming. I see so very many, and I will do my best to get through as many of them as I can. Our produce consumption numbers comparing 2003 to 2015 on a per capita basis or total. So this would be eatings, annual eatings per capita. That's how this particular research is measured. Hey, Elizabeth, is there any chance, is there any chance that the pandemic has helped increase consumption, the consumption data that you're showing? Given that everyone maybe is cooking more at home? I love this question. So what we know today is that there are some sales increases. So early on in the pandemic, particularly around other forms of fruits and vegetables, and we really saw this, for example, in the canned and frozen category. People were like, remember that early days, like stocking up. And so you did see an uptick, let's say, in what we'd call sales data. Then remember, people were concerned about their fresh fruits and vegetables, because depending on how they were packaged, people were nervous about people touching things. People were doing crazy stuff and washing their produce with bleach, and I wanted to cry. So we got through that, and a lot of you helped us with that. So thank you. And we saw a slight decline, if you will, but then we saw that uptick again, and fresh regained, if you will, its position. It is possible that people have increased their consumption. We also know, though, that we don't have that data yet, and we are looking to do what you call this bridge analysis. So, for example, were people stocking up and like that, those canned veggies are sitting in a bunker somewhere, or were people actually like doing something with them? Our hope is they were, and hopefully that sales number indicates a positive trend toward consumption. We also know people did a lot of other things too. They did a lot of baking. And some people feel like they packed on the pandemic pounds, whereas others, made a new renewed commitment to their health and wellness given the pandemic. So I don't know if we know the answer just yet, but behavioral research would say when we disrupt people's routines and they may take up a new behavior like cooking more at home, is they may stick with it for the long term. So great question. NPD research and sampling that was mentioned in the beginning, ethnicity, race, and income level. This is generally representative of the US population based on census data. We are doing more analysis to look at, for example, fruit consumption as it relates to different and or vegetable juice consumption as it relates to the types of things that you're talking about, race, ethnicity, and or income level. And so we're still digging through that, but so we have some of that data, particularly as it relates to, let's say, if there's any significant differences. What I shared with you today was mostly the straight up, kind of overarching data, but that type of data is there. Okay, what share shift between 2019 is statistically significant? Carolyn, I might need a little bit more information on exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking for that race and ethnicity numbers, there's a lot in the data there, so I might not be able to pick just one thing or another at this time, but hey, maybe a good opportunity for another webinar. Clara, how do you overcome the challenge of adequate consumption with the limited intakes of consumption based on certain diets like keto and similar ones? Yes, I know, Clara, this is a big one. Particularly because, we're really looking into the fact like, oh my gosh, are people like avoiding fruit because, they feel like they can't have it or something based on some of these diets. This one I think is really up to my food and nutrition communication colleagues out there to set the record straight when appropriate. And I was just on a podcast recently with a famous fitness influencer where we did just that. And we just kind of said, here's the bottom line. Fruits and vegetables are the plants no one's eating enough of. And it's definitely not there's definitely not the plants that are, challenging our physique. And so let's be real about that. And let's be honest about it. And let's be scientific about it. And it's just straight up not true. So I think that's up to, depending on your population. You have somebody also that's like, keto's their moment, and and you're just thrilled that they're rolling with it and they've taken charge of their world. Maybe that's not the one to be so direct about. So I think that's a case by case basis, but certainly there's probably some contribution there. Isn't the decline in fruit juice since veg and fruit alone isn't the decline due to? So what we see, Carolyn, is that most of the decline is coming from both vegetables and in terms of frequency, remember, vegetable frequency as well as fruit juice. Declining. So that fruit, remember, that was relatively flat. We saw a slight uptick, but we saw the biggest declines in vegetables as well as juice. And again, it's important to look at the compilation of the data. So, that government data may be looking at, let's say, volume, whereas most of this data is looking at frequency, for example. And so we're interested in frequency from a habits perspective. When the study asked about cereal, how did they count smoothies that incorporated cereal like oatmeal? People always are wanting to ask you about this, Candace. So it's that I can tell you just from talking with NPD, we ask questions too, for example, like raisins in, certain types of, or almonds or, stuff within cereal, like dried fruit. A lot of that is probably not done by most Americans in a way that we could capture from, like, let's say, a power of the data perspective. So, I bet you the sample wasn't big enough for that. And we weren't asking about that specifically. So straight up, we're talking like an addition to cereal on top of, whether it be hot or cold. Barbaroos. Avocados are considered a vegetable in this research, which is odd because there's an enormous increase in the consumption of avocados. And so, yes, I see your volume note there, Barb. I appreciate that. In this research, NPD counted it in the context of vegetables, given how they are typically consumed. And so that volume number is excellent. This is looking at a little bit more on frequency. So appreciate that consumption, and avocados are certainly an excellent option in terms of all fruit and vegetable consumption, and also in many forms, available in many forms now too. So is it just hype that consumers are eating more kale and cauliflower since it's not reflected? It could be. And there's more to go a little bit deeper when we look at annual, again, frequency. So, how many times are people actually eating something versus the overall collective amount? And so, people are eating these, but I always think it's important to say, okay, like, is that just people like us? Is it also when you start to look at per commodity, actually high frequency fruit and vegetable consumers are consuming the greatest share of vegetables and or fruit overall. So it's those high frequency consumers that are making up most of the consumption. There's just not a lot of them. So is everybody eating kale and cauliflower? No, they're not. Um, all right, so always interesting to look a little bit deeper. Sarah, the fruit decline in youth, question mark, increases discouragement of fruit juice for babies and toddlers. So when you saw me talk about the decline in youth fruit, that was without juice pulled out. And then you saw me pull out juice very specifically. So depending on when this was asked, you might have saw that separated out juice consumption numbers, which show a decline in all age groups. And then fruit, when we initially discussed it in here, it was pulled out and separated from juice. All right. Any deeper dive into why bananas, berries, apples, convenience, availability? We would need to go and look, excuse me, Jason, a little bit deeper into that. I gave some just my, excuse me, personal color commentary. um, Bananas, for example, they're easy to grab and go. Berries, a lot of promotion around them. Apples, you saw them kind of a slight decline, yet holding their own. And again, this was pre-pandemic. This is some color commentary and discussions with like large apple grower groups. When I was a kid, there were like 3 apples. There was like green, yellow, and red. And now there are so many and amazingly delicious varieties. And so there's a concern that all the varieties out there, maybe it's overwhelming. And is it maybe further commoditizing apples because of it? And I think, we did something very, it was fantastic. It was with one of the companies that actually funded this research, where we were looking at different apple varieties and really tasting them for the difference and the uniqueness of each one. And so it can be difficult to do that, let's say on a large scale, but really recognizing the uniqueness of varieties. By the way, I could say that about potatoes and berries, and I could say that about a lot of different fruits and vegetables, onions. There's some real uniqueness. And given that we're missing some of the feeling and the flavor elements of our communications, maybe that's something that we could focus more on. Do you think people having to consider high sugar content? I'm guessing that means fruit. Nadine, is I do remember this one off the top of my head, is that for example, African Americans who or Black Americans having potentially a higher, as a population group, incidence of diabetes. They also tend to be not heavy fruit consumers, not light fruit consumers, somewhere in the middle. Maybe there's a challenge there, considering that a lot of the population, even beyond that group, is experiencing or dealing with diabetes. And are we seeing a challenge there? This would be the biggest issue that we often hear, for example, as a reason not to eat fruit, also referenced in the earlier comments around different, let's say, diets out there, for example, that to get rid of or limit, if you will, fruit given, quote, sugar content. Okay. Dina, are consumption data consistent with sales data of each fruit and vegetable? So Dina, you are asking that question. I would love to answer that for you. We talked about that even in the context of the pandemic, right? We saw some really big upticks in sales data, for example, of certain fruit and vegetable items or certain forms. And then we saw those ebbs and flows. There's some great data that talks about week to week, these potential changes. I don't think we can, it would be indicative potentially of consumption, but I don't think we can say for sure. Can you, oh, hey. I'm trying to keep track here. Okay. French fries removed. Got it. I see that. Um, with some of the, okay, let me just see this really quick. Are heavy veggie eaters 3 per day? I'd have to look into that. I feel like they might be a little bit more. So Carolyn, sorry, I can't answer that for the top of my head for you. But I think we looked at it more over the course of the week, but I can look into that. Did fruit juice include juicing? It did include, that would have been included. We did see, for example, just a color commentary. It's not like it was a super huge population of people that are doing that. But we also saw, for example, an increase. So again, looking at trends outside of the products themselves, during the pandemic, for example, as a appliance, juicers we saw an uptick there. And so were more people, for example, interested in juicing their own, given there was a high uptick, for example, in people wanting to consume more vitamin C. So interesting questions there. Smoothies fit into, really, we added them for the first time this year in the beverage category. So they are listed there. What is dried veg? So this can be, there's some freeze dried. This isn't a huge part of dried vegetable category, but there are some dried products out there in the freeze dried area. We did want to look, for example, there are a lot of, let's say, veggie based like crackers, or you might be thinking cauliflower pizza crust, for example. These in the context of the full complement of all fruits and beverages that are out there and available, is that, we're not seeing, there wasn't a significant power in this particular example or data set there to really gather that. And then in terms of the survey measurement, you could start, the tools, this is something our partner, they were gracious enough to allow us to share this information with you. The National Eating Trends is something that, there was a significant investment into this research. I would say more than $100,000 worth of investment into this research to utilize this type of data set. So, they have a lot of their tools, et cetera, and we work with them to capture the analysis. So, I definitely think that would be something to ask them for, specifically. How do fruit pouches factor in? Does it cause kids not to like actual fruit texture versus raw fruit? We did ask a question about pouched varieties, and we did see that uptick, for example, and we just aren't seeing, we saw that has leveled off to some degree, in terms of actual consumption. I would need to ask others around, who have experienced the mom category. I think, like all forms, this is a great grab and go idea, and it's also great for like athletes. So even my high school athlete uses some pouch fruit varieties just because it's super easy, and he loves all kinds of fruit. So I'll leave that one to those that are engaged in that, specifically based on personal preference and experience. Is the data retail data, wholesale, and or food service? It is in all occasions, Jason. So hopefully that gives you some context there. Here's let me keep going. If convenience is key, is frozen produce increasing in usage? I'm glad you asked, Victoria. The answer is, over the pandemic, they were increasing. Again, some of this data was pre-pandemic, so we weren't seeing that uptick, but once COVID hit and people were looking to really stock up, we did see that. Okay. Does the dried category include freeze-dried fruits and veggies? The answer is yes. I'm trying to answer as many of these as I can, and recognizing that we are getting close to 15 minutes over. I'm probably going to cut it in about 1 minute or so. we agree and support the dietary guidelines, cup guidelines for fruits and veggies. Absolutely. The recent Harvard research, we provided commentary on that, and certainly we're not for excluding any particular fruit or vegetable. So that data is consistent with our own comprehensive science review, which was authored by 13 independent scientists who volunteered their time to look at all of the data in a comprehensive scientific review that looks at all of, I want to say, gosh, more than 20 health conditions. So we found our data to be consistent with theirs, particularly on the 5 cups and the various health conditions. But overall, we're not interested in limiting consumers with telling them they shouldn't eat a particular fruit or vegetable. We would stay close to the dietary guidelines for Americans. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I love all these questions. I tried to answer, I answered a ton of them actually. I'll keep going. I'll look for some opportunities. A quick one right here. Is the tomato category fresh only, or does it include pasta sauce, tomato sauce, etc.? The answer is yes. Everything that I showed you generally was all forms. But certain things like there's less dried bananas than there are fresh bananas, for example. So you can think about usage in that way as well. Well, I just wanted to let you know what was really coming next from PBH, and maybe even what you've been seeing online. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to sing it with me or sing it with us at PBH, but we have had such a fun time talking about consumption with consumers. And remember, we said, this research is for professionals. This research is about us looking at these trends and figuring out how to come up with innovative behavior-based solutions to positively impact consumption going forward. When it comes to our communications with consumers, we need to translate this in a way that taps into that know, feel, do behavioral framework. And so what you're seeing coming from PBH is really in the context of feeling and putting fruits and vegetables into the conscious mind, in a way, the subconscious mind, by tapping into really fun lyrics of songs. And so this has been so fun. And you might have some others too. I think you're going to see us bring this campaign back. So if you'd like to play around with us on this one, this one's super fun. So conscious consumption is about intentionally implementing new habits. So I said it's time for a new era of conscious consumption given the data. And so how do we pull in new habits into the daily routine? Essentially what's familiar, by adding fruits and veggies in the mix. So if you look at some of the habit behavioral literature, is we would need to repeat the same thing in the same context in a way that almost makes it automatic. And when it becomes automatic, it's typical, it can last. A case in point is brushing your teeth. Think about that one. And then how do we apply doing that particular habit in a similar context in a way that now becomes just a part of us? It's a part of what we do. That's what we want for fruit and vegetable consumption. So this was super fun. And it was a way for us to start to bring fruits and vegetables into take the research, translate it, utilizing behavioral science, creating conscious and subconscious, hopefully, memories of fruits and vegetables in a really playful way. And so I hope you like this. And if you haven't seen it, you can check it out on social media. Now, this isn't the end. This was just, remember, we said a very, first peek at this research, and there's so much more to unpack, and you've given us some great ideas, things that you'd like to see as well and understand more of. So I appreciate that. Here's some ways between now and then, though, that you could get involved and maybe spread the fruit and veggie love and help people experience more health and happiness. So just to keep up with our fun lyrics here, is you can get into the groove. Please follow us on social media at Fruits and Veggies for most channels. The exception would be Twitter at fruits_veggies. Use hashtag have a plant. You don't have to be a member. We want everybody to be a part of this movement that's now reaching millions and has won awards for doing so. And so we want everybody to be a part of it and feel empowered. And you know what? In September, we're going to do a whole big month-long celebration in National Fruits and Veggies Month. It also happens to be the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables. And so really as America, we can bring everybody together around the plants that no one's eating enough of, but do it in a super fun way. So you can create your own messages, you can amplify ours. And so every month, just in case you didn't know this, in our influencer newsletter, we put out sample social media posts every single month. And people tell us they want it. And so we give it. And then it's like, I really want you to use it. And you don't have to like take it word for word. You can make it your own too. And so it's just some ideas and thought starters to be part of that conversation. We want you to celebrate. And so again, we want to tap into the feeling of fruits and vegetables. So making it fun is great. If you think that we should be talking about this to a group that you're a part of, or, there's a podcast that you know about that we should share this information with, let us know. We'd love to reach out. And, we feel that this information should be available as much as possible as open source. And so we want people to use this, translate this, and then maybe we need to also change what we're doing to positively impact consumption. Now, this is the first PBH Health and Wellness webinar that's going to cover State of the Plate. There likely will be others, and there will be other topics like next month focused totally on flavor and some amazing scientific research through the McCormick Science Institute around flavor and how just even adding some flavor in herbs and spices can increase consumption. So it's those ideas that can really spark more innovative solutions. And then there is a State of the Plate toolkit. And so it's fruitsandveggies.org/state of the plate toolkit. It has some key messages. It has some social posts and all those graphics. There are so many of them now, those sing it with me graphics. And we love when people come up with their own too, you can get all those graphics in addition to some, more infographics that highlight specific information. And those are more data driven, more for professionals. And that's available in the toolkit as well. And we're now unpacking this data just like you are. So in the months to come, I would anticipate that we would have more resources to share, as it relates maybe to retail opportunities or how to translate some of this for food service or messaging, or utilizing no feel do in a unique way, given these guidelines, this data, or the idea, again, fruits and veggies first. How do we really make that come to life? Because nobody's doing it in the context of fruits and veggies in the appetizer discussion. So something as simple as that, all the way to, what does this really mean for the future? So stay tuned for more. And, you can get started even today because some of these insights also made their way into our Have a Plant, the Plant Forward Eating Guide. We did this in partnership with California Walnuts. It's ideas, insights, and inspirations for plant passionate professionals. We'd love to do more with this as well. But really, there are communications implications. There's implications for food service. There's implications for retail here on just getting people to eat more plants. And some fabulous research in there too, just to help us understand both from a plant forward trend perspective, but also a behavioral science perspective. How do we really do no feel do in the context of different settings? And how do we get started? So I just want you to be encouraged today. This research is meant to help us recognize that there's so much more progress that can be made. And we know that exposure and repetition is really important for consumer habits. It's also important for ours. And I just think that there are just so very many opportunities for us to utilize the no feel do behavioral framework, focus on the feelings while prioritizing plants and making fruits and vegetables a mainstay of the plate. And so I just want to thank you for your time today, all of your questions and your feedback, because as I said early on, you're our biggest and most important partners in all of this, because many of you are connecting directly, either as part of the produce industry or working directly with consumers in public health, or inspiring consumers online, regardless of your setting, whether it's in the store or in food service or online or in public health. I mean, you're very important. And so we're thrilled that you're standing with us in all of this. So thank you very much for your time today, and be on the lookout for those materials. We went a long time. We're going to have to think of some new ways to keep the party going. Thank you again for staying strong, stay safe, and we look forward to engaging with you again soon.